mad panicking.
It's over 9,000!
Back in the mid-90s, it was an exciting time to be an anime fan in America, as the art form was just starting to really rise in popularity there. Anime had already been around in one form or another, of course, but it was around this time that the word itself was being used regularly on TV and in casual conversation, or at least as far as I can recall. There were advertisements for mail-order anime VHS collections on TV, and certain video stores were carrying them as well. And you could even catch the occasional anime on cable, with channels like Starz and the Sci-Fi Channel getting in early. But when Cartoon Network launched Toonami in March of 1997, it meant we could watch a bit of anime every day, and 10-year-old me couldn't have been happier. And there's no doubt that the reigning king of syndicated anime at the time was Dragon Ball Z. The wild characters, great animation, and intense action had me hooked immediately, and from day one I was a die-hard DBZ fan. At the time though, I can recall lamenting that there weren't any DBZ video games available for me to play, because after getting all hyped up watching the show, I wanted to kick some ass using those same characters.
I'm sick of your little games. We are the king.
And unlike now, when there's a seemingly limitless number of DBZ games to choose from, at the time there weren't, to my knowledge, any available in the United States. There had been a ton of DBZ games released on consoles in Japan though, and honestly, most of them sucked, or at least didn't go much beyond mediocrity, with games like Hyperdimension being the rare exceptions. On the other hand, by 1997 there had also been a few DBZ arcade games released that also stayed exclusive to Japan, and it wasn't until moving here myself that I eventually got to play them. The first arcade game ever based on the series was released in 1993. Developed by Cobra Team and published by Banpresto, it was simply titled Dragon Ball Z, or Z, depending on how you pronounce it. And it came in its own unique cabinet shaped like a robot, which is pretty cool, as by that time candy cabs had become the standard in Japan, so this certainly helped the game stand out. Anyway, the first DBZ arcade game, how was it? Well, in all honesty, this game sucks. It sucks in a way that would have been heartbreaking for me if I had actually played it when I was 10 years old. It's a one-on-one fighter and features a roster of 8 playable characters, split into 4 good guys, if you include Vegeta, even though he was a murderous bastard at this point in the anime.
Virginia! Hanging out with little boys in spandex, I see!
Yes!
I love you, Vagina, but you can't be doing that, come on!
And 4 bad guys, including Frieza, Captain Ginyu, Rikum, and Birder, which I thought was an odd inclusion. Didn't see him much in DBZ games back then. I guess they were really dedicated to the even split of good guys and bad guys, otherwise we could have gotten Krillin to fill out the roster. Oddly enough though, Birder was the only character I actually had any success with, as this game is pretty difficult and pretty much requires you to be as cheap as possible, and Birder's Chun-Li kick fit the bill. Honestly, this isn't a bad looking game, it looks pretty damn good all things considered, and the sound design is at least okay. The real issue here is the gameplay. As I said before, it's a 2D fighter and it uses a 3 attack button setup and special attacks similar to what you'd have in any other 2D fighter. But in a stroke of genius, someone at Banpresto decided that the characters shouldn't jump, but instead should just sort of float all around the screen, which is very difficult to get used to and very discombobulating. Plus, your attacks change depending on where you are in relation to your opponents, and actually landing any attacks in an intelligent way becomes all but impossible. So instead it becomes a mad scramble to throw fireballs and cheese your special moves, just praying for a win, or at least that's how it was for me. You can argue that I just suck at this game, and that's probably true, but I have been playing fighting games for most of my life, and I can definitely say that at a time when games like Street Fighter and Samurai Showdown were on the market, this game was just downright pathetic by comparison. The first DBZ arcade game is a certified dragon turd.
Sorry, I saw an opening that seemed to scream out attacks, so I did.
In 1994, Cobra Team and Band Presto teamed up again to release a follow-up to their first DBZ arcade game, entitled Dragon Ball Z 2 Super Battle. And is it the fighting game masterpiece that the first game certainly wasn't? No, not really. But is it a lot better than the first game? Absolutely. For starters, the characters can actually jump this time around, which is a marked improvement. It actually plays like, a fighting game. The roster has also been updated to feature characters from the Android and Cell sagas, and now features 10 in total, and their movesets have been significantly expanded, now including combos, more special attacks, and a super combo meter was added, allowing for some pretty epic super attacks. This game also implemented both air and ground combat, allowing you to knock opponents into the sky and back down to the ground with certain special attacks. Though even when you're in the sky, the controls still function basically the same, which I honestly prefer. Anything that doesn't resemble the gameplay of the first game is okay in my book. That's not to say that this is a great fighting game though, it still has plenty of flaws. For starters, the core gameplay itself still feels way too floaty and difficult to get a handle on. It plays really fast, but not the good kind of fast, not like Guilty Gear or Melty Blood kind of fast, but a Street Fighter the movie, I'm barely in control of this thing kind of fast. I kinda got accustomed to it after a while, but it's still not a fighting game I intend to go back to anytime soon. And on top of that, the CPU is once again brutal and very cheap, forcing you to once more cheese the hell out of the game in order to get anywhere, mostly with Vegeta and his flying kick attack, which seems to do more chip damage than when it actually connects. So yeah, still not a great fighting game, way better than its predecessor, but you wouldn't go playing this before something like Street Fighter or Killer Instinct. It's a pretty damn good looking game though, with solid character designs, and a ton of Easter eggs to look out for in the backgrounds of each stage, so at least it has that going for it, but once again, some mediocre sound design. In short, it could have been a lot better, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Doesn't seem that you like fighting. I like marshmallows. What's that got to do with anything? Well, I'm hungry, and your bald head looks like one.
Ooh, faced.
Also in 1994, a radically different kind of DBZ arcade game was released, and that was Dragon Ball Z VR Versus, which surprisingly enough was developed by Sega, which is a pretty cool combination. But this ends up being a case of lots of sizzle and very little steak. Obviously, this is a pretty good looking game, much more impressive than the other two I just talked about, featuring very detailed character sprites and some flashy effects, all while looking like the DBZ interpretation of a Punch-Out game. It gives you 5 different characters to play as and features an original boss character in the form of Azoto, a demonic looking supervillain who, as far as I know, has never appeared in anything else related to DBZ. So on paper this game seems pretty cool, but again it falls flat in the gameplay department. This is essentially a straight up button masher. When your opponent is up close, mash those punch buttons, and when they're far away, spam the hell out of your fireballs, also while being mindful of those that are flying at you. And that's it really. Not much in the way of strategy, just go balls to the wall with attacks. And that's not so bad when you're playing on emulator and have all the continues you could ever ask for, but I imagine it wasn't so fun when each game cost 100 yen. A cool looking game for sure, and some okay music for a change, but about as deep as a puddle. Still, if you're a DBZ fan, it is worth checking out at least once just for the experience. There have been more DBZ arcade games released in the years since, and more console games than I can count. But we can save those for another video because after those 3 games, I'm all Dragon Balled out. And I could definitely use a sensu bean. Or a beer, whichever comes first.
Hey, Kakarot. You know how nobody likes Hitler? Well, I did the math the other day, and technically I'm like 5 million Hitlers. But you guys have been so...
Listen, I'm just gonna order you an Uber. No, not in the house!
Awesome!